Well, based on recent statistics from a recently completed study, it's not really so recent, but I'll tell you more about that. The Caribbean Policy Research Institute at Capri is calling for a revision of the PATH program to better serve the needs of Jamaicans who need help. Welfare. Here with us this morning, one of the researchers on the project and the executive director of Capri, Dr. Damien Kng. Welcome to Smile. Good to have you.
Always great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. How old is this report, Doc?
This report was actually published 2 years ago, but it's one of those reports that is really, continuously relevant. So we appreciate the fact that it really is brought up from time to time so we can keep a focus on what really is one of the most important aspects of our public policy, which is social welfare and distribution.
May I ask how it is that you came to do this particular study, or really the process for choosing what it is that you choose to do reports on?
We look at sort of two dimensions when we try to decide what calls for research. One element is what is the likelihood that the recommendations are going to be taken up? The second one is if the recommendations are taken up and reform is enacted, how big an impact does it have on the economy and society? So it's probability multiplied by impact.
Okay.
And this issue of how we look after those who are neediest and need assistance is one of the most important areas of public policy. And not just from a welfare point of view, not just from a moral point of view, but in terms of wider economic impact. So it really is an important area of work.
All right. You made some recommendations, and one of the things was the conditionalities.
Yes.
To walk me through that.
When cash transfer programs, which is the genre under which the PATH program falls, when cash transfer programs were first invented in Mexico a few decades ago, the idea was that you give the neediest households cash instead of assistance in kind or instead of discounts on value-added taxes. You give them cash, but you make it conditional on certain behaviors of those households, such as the children having a good attendance record at school, or perhaps if there is a pregnant woman in the household, that she attend a clinic regularly. But what has happened over the years is that it has been found in cash transfer programs around the world that the conditionalities may actually get in the way of the effectiveness of the program, because the households that are the most needy are the ones that have difficulty meeting the conditionalities.
Yeah.
So you end up really getting in the way of the effectiveness of the program. And many international studies have found that if you take away the conditionalities, the programs work better.
So, we want to get to some of the recommendations, but let me ask you for those who don't know how the program works and what it entails. The PATH program, outside of the conditionalities, provides, do we know how much it is, Dr. Kng? Is it still in the region of 3,000 something?
Somewhere thereabouts.
And do you remember the conditionalities that one had to meet? I hear like if you have a stove, you don't qualify, or if you have a...
Well, no, those are not conditionalities. The most important thing that a cash transfer program and PATH does is to identify who are the neediest. And what it does, which is really quite brilliant, is instead of asking people how much they earn, because people, one, lie about how much they earn, and secondly, people that have irregular income don't really have a good idea.
Right.
Yes.
So it uses what is called a proxy means test. And what that is that we look at the circumstances in which you live
And make a
and
judgment.
use those as a proxy for your level of income and living standards. So a household that has a fridge and a stove and 2 TVs is better off than a household that lacks those appliances.
Correct.
So that's the idea.
Okay.
And it actually is very effective in targeting the neediest people, because people don't have high incomes and live poorly.
Facts. So you say, the lead researcher at the time, Monique Graham, shared that the NHF, let's go NHF now, ineffective as a social protection policy, as 90% of beneficiaries are not below the poverty line.
This is one of the most important elements to consider in determining what is the most effective way to carry out social welfare. It's called targeting. What percentage of the beneficiaries are the ones that are below the poverty line? So NHF only 10% of the expenditure goes to those below the poverty line. It's even worse for the NHT. Whereas because of the proxy means test, a high 90-odd% of those on the PATH program are actually below the poverty line, are actually the neediest.
So you're saying, the recommendation may be then, what are the proxy means tests for the other types of social protection?
Or to use the funding for those other programs and push it through PATH. Because again, cash transfers are an effective way to meet the needs of the of the neediest.
But would they then say, Doc, oh, but those programs have their own goals and objectives? What would we be doing? Shifting budgets?
Well, you want to start by saying what is the objective of the program.
Right.
If the objective of the program is to alleviate poverty, then you want to target those that are in poverty. If it has some other objective, well, that's fine. But don't call it an anti-poverty program.
Gotcha.
And is alleviating poverty a viable objective? Really?
You know, one of the most disturbing things about our economic history is to recognize how persistent intergenerationally poverty is. That if you look at the households that made up the different quintiles of the income distribution 100 years ago, it is not far different from the ones that do so now in terms of the intergenerational links.
Yes.
So poverty gets passed on from generation to generation. In other words, the people who are struggling in Jamaica, it's not entirely their fault.
So I was just going to say, whose fault is that, and why is it being perpetuated? Somebody's not doing enough to break.
Because we have not had redistributional policies that have broken that cycle of intergenerational policy. And that is why, where we started, that this is one of the most important areas of public policy. And we haven't even gotten into, taking it out of that dynamic context. We haven't even gotten into what are the benefits to the economy now of having a more even distribution of income.
Correct. I'm glad you said that, because sometimes I say to people, if you alleviate poverty and you give more access to resources and access to people across the board, it's a better society. I don't know why some people feel that there must be the rich.
Disparity.
Yeah.
To pick one element, the wastage of human resources. People who are potentially just brilliant, inventors, discoverers, scientists, entrepreneurs, who, because of disadvantages early in life, because they don't have proper circumstances at their home that allow for mental and intellectual development.
Correct.
The entire economy never gets the benefit of that potential being realized.
Good point.
What I'm about to say is a whole new discussion that you have to come back for.
It is one of the most important areas of public policy.
Yeah, so what I want to talk about, you have to come back for, and that's sports and the creative arts, which are two of the areas that have given people below the poverty line that opportunity to advance, and yet do not get any kind of resource support.
But it's important that you brought that up, because even with those disadvantages, you see where that creative talent comes from.
Yes.
In sports
yes.
and in the arts.
Yes.
Now imagine if those opportunities also existed for those in the sciences.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those in the humanities. Because that potential exists all across society.
Right across.
Boy, Dr. King, that sounds like another study. Yes, that point about the generational poverty cycle is something that 100 years ago versus today, it sounds like something that needs to be explored.
We need to break into it, and there is a whole lot of evidence that cash transfer programs are effective. And when I say effective, it is that we have discovered that cash transfer programs are used not just to, feed people now.
Correct.
But families use it to invest in their children, to invest in small businesses, and the entire community benefits.
Yeah.
If some in the household, some in the community are on the cash transfer program.
Absolutely.
So of the recommendations made 2 years ago, what has been taken on? How has this moved the needle, impact?
Well, I wouldn't say it has moved the needle, but certainly it has generated a conversation and brought, increased understanding to the importance of this area and why many of the existing programs are not effective.
Gotcha. Which is important to know where we go from here.
Yeah. I love Capri.
Great.
Because I keep saying to people, sometimes when you hear that research has been done, we don't connect what the research means to us as people. And so I like the idea that Capri does this and shares the research, and makes a recommendation. So we know that research is important.
Yeah. And the most recent one, I'm going to give you 10 seconds, Dr. Kng, is the last one you did was what?
Growthless jobs. The paradox that recently, over the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen a surge in job creation, 10% growth in employment, and only negligible movement in GDP and output. So we are having more jobs, but not the economic growth that should go along with it.
It not add up.
And that's going to be put onto our website. It was launched last week. It's going to be uploaded to our website this week.
Okay. I hope
The maths not mathsing.
Maths is not. The maths is English in is the problem. All right. Executive Director of Capri, Dr. Damien Kng. Thanks, Dr. Kng.
Thank you very much.
What's coming up?
Coming up, we're going to prepare young people to succeed. Simone will have that one. We'll soon come.